9:41 exactly, and we've just celebrated a wonderful day on Saturday. A half a holiday is how I refer to it, because a Saturday is a half a holiday, is it not? We don't work full day. Most people don't work on Saturday. So if you have a public holiday falling on a Saturday, I kind of feel cheated. But be that as it may, September is Heritage Month, where the nation observes and celebrates all that it inherited from preceding generations. This is a sort of inheritance that includes, but not limited to, culture, traditions, monuments, knowledge, land, and belief systems. However, there is a large majority of South Africans who still feel marginalized and don't believe that Heritage Day is a day to be celebrated at all. Let's find out why that is so with Sandile Swana. He is a political analyst talking to us about this issue. Sandile Swana, very good morning to you. Welcome to the program.
Good morning to you, Julie. Thank you also for the topic.
So, what do we make of this? Why is it that people still feel marginalized, don't feel a part of the greater South Africa, and don't celebrate or feel included? What is the issue here?
Maybe we can look at history to try and understand this issue. A lot of us do not know that in England, for instance, for a long time, about 700 years, you could not even do state business or represent yourself in the English language, in the native tongue in England. The language of official business would have been French in England, and the church would have been handled in Latin. So it took quite a long time for English to be recognized as an academic language, as a language of the courts, language of the state, diplomatic language in England. So what I'm saying to you is that once you have colonialism, you are a colonized or a conquered people, a disrupted and invaded people, or an enslaved people, then your own language, your own culture in your own land becomes irrelevant. In fact, you just become an appendage in your own country. So that history of colonialism within South Africa and apartheid within South Africa has meant that the languages other than the language of the colonial conquerors and the apartheid white supremacists are the ones that are actually dominant, the language and culture, so to speak. So that is the first problem, but I'll go into more detail as we continue.
Okay, so there's a big issue around colonialism, apartheid, and the two languages. The second one you haven't mentioned yet is Afrikaans, obviously, here in South Africa. And I kind of also wonder why we're not pushing for one of the African languages to become compulsory in our schooling system, in the education sphere. You will respond to that. And just by the way, you talk about Latin. We do know that in this day and age, it is still widely practiced in legal in the legal field. Lots of Latin terminology comes through, and one, as a layperson, you need to wonder, what is that all about? Is it still relevant? So I guess that too is a question that needs to be answered.
Yes, I was reading recently that a certain fellow was announcing that he has finished writing his doctorate in the Zulu language in Wits University. The very first PhD to be written at Wits University in any native African tongue.
Wow, wow.
So every language, whether that language is Shivenda, whether that language is Xhosa or any language in South Africa, has got to develop, and I'm using words language and culture as proxies of each other for the sake of speed of time. Now, once a language, and every language needs to be a language of the courts, it needs to be an academic language. So whether you are speaking Zulu, you should be able to study freely to any level of depth. In the same way that an Italian or a Russian is not afraid to study any topic, whether it's physics, chemistry, or literature, and to any level of depth. So those are the things that would make people feel marginalized. And I will talk about two. Many people think that the Zulu people are culturally very well represented. But actually, the Zulus are at an infancy of cultural representation. Their economic system, their historical economic system, which was not even collapsed by the defeat of King Cetshwayo, has not been revived and replicated. The Zulus are still starving even today. And methods of creating the Zulu economy have not been revived at all as we speak today. The academic thought at the highest level in all subjects, including engineering, technology, and disciplines of that kind, has not been developed, and so on and so forth. So it's not enough to be seen in a very large number, say 500 or 1 million of you, marching around in leather skins and Zulu and Asegais and all that. That's not enough. That's not even the key issue. The key issue is that you must be able to engage with the nations of the world on your own terms, in your own language, in your own culture, without any fear or intimidation of any kind. And I'm not aware of any native language that has been developed to that extent. Secondly, in Afrikaans has got more than 22 dialects. And only now, on a very small scale, we've started to see producers selecting actors who speak different dialects to be on the show, so that people who come from different parts of South Africa, who speak different dialects of Afrikaans, who happen not to be white, by the way, are represented on the TV screen. So there's a number of ways that our people, in their largest numbers and diversity, are actually marginalized culturally. And I want to mention the larger groups, because people think that the larger groups are actually not marginalized. The marginalization is starting with the larger groups, so the smaller groups are totally wiped out in any event.
So the big question then is, who should be taking this responsibility? You and I speak on a regular basis about politics, all sorts of issues around our politics, very especially the corrupt politicians. Should we not be putting this issue right at their doorstep? They were so busy and are so busy lining their pockets with their corrupt activities that they've taken their eye off the ball, preserving our heritage, our culture, promoting it, showing the beauty of African languages and culture to the people across the spectrum. And when you realize the beauty and the richness of the culture, you will then get acceptance from other people in the land, and you will get the admiration and the respect you highly deserve and rightly deserve. So I put the blame right at the door of our corrupt politicians. Sorry for sounding like a stuck record, but this should have been addressed 20 odd years ago when we were supposedly building the country.
Yes, Nelson Mandela was misunderstood. And I want to believe even Steve Biko was misunderstood, because I think there was some kind of linkages in the way Steve Biko thought and the way Mandela thought about consciousness, the mind, dealing with the mind. So you don't liberate people physically first, or more importantly, physically first, you liberate the mind. Yeah, so Mandela talked about the reconstruction and development of the soul. So which means culturally, linguistically, and even in terms of conceptualizing our civilization. We had to somebody, the leaders, Mandela thought the leaders, the political leaders and other leaders in society would be preoccupied with that task from 1994 onwards. But that task of the RDP was interrupted within 24 months and discarded, and it has not been resuscitated and until today. But I also wanted to touch on you, Julie, a little bit. I was so impressed one day. I'm talking about the African Muslim community, to be specific.
Alhamdulillah.
So I was so impressed one day about the extent of literature that exists in Nigeria, for instance, and other parts of Africa, written by Islamic scholars. So you look at me, I've gone through a lot of schooling, but I've never read a book, in prescribed textbook written by African Islamic scholars. We know about Chinua Achebe and others. So those books, so our understanding of our rich African heritage is so cut off. There are people who even determine that Islamic scholars, no matter what they've written, is not going to be there in the prescribed books at universities and at school. So all of that is a form of marginalization of African cultures in different ways.
Alhamdulillah, lots of work has gone into, as we refer to as Dawa, and we know that apart from other literature, lots of work has been done in translating the Holy Quran in a number of African languages, thereby reaching that many more people and them understanding what the religion and the culture is all about. So let's hope that work continues. My closing question to you then would be, Sandile, should Thabo Mbeki's African Renaissance not have addressed this issue? And had it been addressed appropriately, you and I shouldn't and wouldn't have been having this discussion this morning.
Yes, I think the African identity for all Africans, I think Thabo Mbeki touched the hearts of all Africans from Cape to Cairo, if I may use that language. But again, similar to the RDP, when amateurish, pedestrian-type politicians, corrupt politicians took power, they ejected the African Renaissance. And in doing so, they scattered a vision of Africa. They scattered a lot of things that would have been down the road by now. And maybe that would have also assisted in resuscitating the vision of Mandela of saying, let us do the RDP of the soul.
And that's where we have to leave it. Always, always a pleasure talking with you. You really stretch my mind, and I'm hoping you stretch the minds of our listeners as well. You go well. God bless. Till the next time, as always. Thank you. It's exactly 9:54 a.m. We will be joined by Francesca de Gasperi in a minute or two to talk about a very important initiative today, international initiative for that matter. But do stay with us. We will unpack that in a minute or two.